Thank God it's Friday. Another brutal week is behind us. Well, I hope it hasn't been too brutal for you. We're continuing on with the next installment of Accidental Christ. The story of Jesus is told by his uncle. And today will probably be a rather short one, unless I go 2 little chapters. But anyway, it starts off with another little epigram, and the epigram's from Matthew 13:10 and 11. Then his disciples drew near him and said, "Why do you speak to them in parables?" And he answered, saying to them, "Because to you it is granted to know the mystery of the kingdom of heaven, but it is not granted to them." Chapter 2. At daybreak, Clopas left the compound and set out by ass to Magdala to arrange for the supplies to feed the multitudes and the boats to deliver them. "You have my proxy, boy. If the council should convene before my return," he shouted to Jesus as he trotted his ass through the gate. I couldn't help myself. In the days that followed, life at Cana compound was chaos. The beloved disciples busied themselves making arrangements for the walk on the water, as they dubbed the Galilean campaign, and at the same time tried desperately to cope with the influx of new pupils arriving each day, drawn by news of the wedding miracle. Jesus used the time to organize his thoughts concerning the content and character of the sermons he would deliver. He barricaded himself in his chamber and rehearsed in his mind the classic lectures of Essene wisdom. His favorites were the Beatitudes and the Syrian parables. However, his real challenge would be to announce his coming kingdom without committing an act of sedition. Public speaking was a dangerous affair in Roman Palestine. John had paid with his life. For over 2 generations, the only way a man of conviction could speak his mind publicly was to speak allegorically. The people seemed to enjoy the game. Even the most unsophisticated citizen could read between the lines of a well-crafted parable, and the expert spinner of such yarns took pride in being able to embody multiple levels of meaning into the most inane-sounding tale. Jesus' message was the most dangerous a man could deliver in public. Revolution. The overthrow of the established Herodian government, long maintained by conspiracy and force. Because his burgeoning fame was the result of his persona as a miracle-working holy man and healer, it followed that he must veil this message in religious and scriptural allusions. But in doing so, he would simultaneously open himself to the scrutiny of the religious institutions, some of which, like the Pharisees, could brand him a blasphemer and a heretic, and having put to death for the most innocuous breach of their interpretation of Mosaic law. It was a dangerously thin line to walk, and he knew he would have to push the limits on both fronts. 7 days before Jesus was to depart for his walk upon the water, Joseph of Ramtha arrived at the compound alone and unannounced. He was ushered into Jesus' chamber. I've heard from Perez Bar Elam that you will soon begin to fatten the flock on the shores of Lake Tiberias. That was another name for the Sea of Galilee. Do you plan to turn the sea into wine? No, but Uncle Clopas has reckoned how to fill the stomachs of the multitudes with miraculous bread and fish. Joseph placed a scroll of the book of Isaiah upon the little table near the window. The Sea of Galilee. You have chosen your first venue wisely. He unrolled the scroll to a marked passage and read out loud. In the past he humbled the land of Zebulun and the land of Naphtali, but in the future he will honor Galilee of the Gentiles by the way of the sea along the Jordan. Unquote. Have you given much thought to the content of your public message? I have thought of little else since the marriage feast. Joseph answers, I hope you will allow me to join your deliberations. I'm an old survivor, and not without skill in crafting language that says one thing and means another. Where can I get a clean scroll and a pot of ink? Jesus produced the items and shouted downstairs for food and drink. The two talked through the night. By daybreak, they had crystallized their thoughts around a central theme. Jesus would further advance the message of John the Baptist and preach of a coming theocracy as a subjective spiritual utopia called the Kingdom of Heaven. To ensure that the population knew that the regime was to be the restoration of the mythical kingdom of David, he would make constant reference to the Father in heaven. Furthermore, he would declare his royal birthright by referring himself as the Son of the Father. Of course, the concept of God as Father was foreign to the Jewish mind. At the very least, it was shockingly revolutionary. And Jesus and Joseph debated for hours the wisdom of conjuring this new and potentially heretical image of deity. Abraham was the father of the Jews, and the father figure to the Jews. Abraham never referred to God as Father. Neither did Moses or Elijah. In fact, in all of Scripture, only 2 verses in the book of Isaiah and 1 Psalm of David made such allusions. Still, they agreed that these scraps of text could be cited, if necessary, to assuage any criticism that Jesus was introducing a new God to the children of Israel. The fact that Jesus could prove his direct hereditary descent from fathers Abraham, David, and Saul made it an irresistible and key element to the parable of his sonship in the kingdom of heaven. At no time must you or your followers be tricked into saying that the Father is God, or that you are the Son of God. That would be death to us all. Take shelter in vagueness. I assure you, those with ears to hear will immediately know what you are saying. Joseph yawned as he stood up and stretched his arms in the warmth of the dawning sunlight. And those without ears will see a healer, a handsome holy man to hail and follow. And now, my lord, I drowse. Tell me where I can nap. The Council of Seven meets here at high noon. This news caught Jesus by surprise. Uncle Clopas has embarked for Magdala, but I hold his proxy. You may sleep here. I'll rest for a while in the library. As he reached the stairs, Joseph of Ramtha called after him. Oh, please inform your mentor, the master physician, and that young spy for the abbot of Carmel, that the council craves their presence at the noon meeting. Jesus did not like the sound of those words. He nodded his acknowledgement. After relaying Joseph's ominous message to Lazar and Brother Apollonius, Jesus returned to the library, stretched out upon the floor to rest. He tried to sleep, but could not. Well, I told you that was short. There's another short chapter to follow, and as we've only gone 12 minutes, I think I'll go ahead and read it too, because it more or less explains and sets up how many of the miraculous tales of the Gospels are explained by this scenario. It starts with the epigram from St. Mark 14, verses 13, 14, and 15. And he sent two of his disciples and said unto them, Go to the city, and behold, you will meet a man carrying a vessel of water. Follow him. And wherever he enters, say to the owner of the house, Our master says, Where is the guest chamber where I may eat the Passover with my disciples? And he will show you a large upper room furnished and prepared. There make ready for us. Chapter 3. The Council of Seven assembled in the library. The spacious room afforded little relief from the midday heat. The conspirators stripped to the waist and sat in the shadows along two walls like cronies at a Roman bath. Where is Clopas? He's allowed the plan to careen out of control. It had to start somewhere. You've plotted safely in your mind for 30 years. Now you have no stomach when we begin in earnest. How dare you question my heart? My zealoters have slain a score of nobles and bureaucrats who would hinder our Lord's ascension. But many more must be removed before the way is cleared for his triumphal entry into Jerusalem. Barabbas estimates 2 more years of, My lords, please. Joseph of Ramtha rose from his seat and gestured for Lazar to close the shutters to the courtyard. No one is suggesting that we're ready to purchase the ass for our Messiah's trot into the city. Lazar giggled as if he expected laughter from the entire assembly. None came. Joseph of Ramtha cleared his throat and continued. One thing is clear, however. The great drama has begun, and we must accept the opening act. Do not worry, my friend. I think we can buy a year or 2 more for our band of zealoters to finish weeding the garden. This time the council members chuckled slyly. Lazar remained silent. In the meantime, the good word of the coming kingdom will be preached by Jesus the Nazarite, a holy man from Galilee who turns water into wine, heals the sick, and feeds the hungry, and who, by the time the garden is weeded, will be the most famous man in all of Roman Palestine. The council listened all afternoon as Joseph and Jesus revealed the allegorical subtleties of the kingdom of heaven. All agreed the message was masterfully crafted and discussed how best to arrange for provocateurs to follow in the wake of Jesus' travels to clarify the word among the most radical and motivated elements of each community. Brother Apollonius and Lazar outlined the details of the coming walk on the water and feeding of the multitudes. Everyone agreed it was a wonderful idea, and Elam of Japhala, who owned property in the north, offered to stock the caves between Tyre and Sidon should Jesus bring his message to the coast. However, the council was not of one mind concerning Lazar's idea of Jesus traveling with a retinue of Galilean dolts. Although they all eventually admitted the basic wisdom of the plan, there was much debate over how Jesus and the council would stay in communication under such circumstances. Joseph of Ramtha listened quietly to the arguments. Finally, he stood to speak. My friends, we've listened all afternoon to the wise counsel of Brother Apollonius and young Lazar. I'm sure it will not surprise any of you to learn that they are both agents of the abbot of the monastery of Mount Carmel. As one of our oldest and dearest supporters, the abbot has seen to the education of our king and has supplied us with the beloved disciples who shepherd the pupils of our mass movement. Is there any among us who doubts the abbot's fidelity or goodwill and loyalty of Brother Apollonius and Lazar? With only one exception, the elders voiced their support. Ephron of Arbela asked for the floor. My lords, well, I certainly have no objections concerning the fealty of the good abbot or the good intentions of Brother Apollonius and Lazar. I confess I harbor some doubts about young Lazar. I confess, not only is he very young, but I question whether or not the fire of racial passion burns hot enough in his veins. What are you talking about? Jesus jumped to his feet. Lazar is a Canaanite Samaritan. Ephron calmly interrupted. Jesus fell silent and turned to Lazar, then to Joseph of Ramtha. Lazar cleared his throat. My lords, may I speak? Of course, son, Joseph said. It is true, I am a Samaritan, the son of a Canaanite whore. My father was a goldsmith, a Judean Jew. He also fathered my two older sisters. He bore great love for my mother, and upon his death provided generously for her and her children. As I was the only male child he ever sired, he bequeathed me his home in Bethany, with instructions that my mother and two sisters be allowed to live there. However, he had other plans for me. After my mother and sisters were settled in Bethany, I was taken to the Essene Monastery on Mount Carmel and there enrolled for instruction. I was 6 years old. I am now 16 and have only returned home once in that time, 4 years ago, to visit my sisters when my mother died. Please, my Lord, in my heart I am every bit as much of an Essene Jew as Brother Apollonius or my master or any of the beloved disciples. Do not make my blood stand against me as witness. I have been baptized. I am circumcised. I pleaded with the abbot to allow me to leave the monastery and serve the master. I have been with the movement since Cinebris. More than anything on earth, I desire to continue. And since you arrived at Cana, have you been the abbot's angel, carrying regular reports to Carmel? Is this not true? Joseph of Ramtha asked. Yes, my lord, with full knowledge of yourself and the entire council. These messages, do you commit them to paper or relay them through other messengers? Indeed not, sir. I deliver all messages personally. For security, I rely entirely upon my memory. I am blessed with an extraordinary memory, a talent that earned me my situation as the abbot's valet. Sir, I had no idea that my duties were viewed with suspicion. The abbot is the principal of the movement. He trusts my fealty and discretion. And so do we, Joseph said with a smile. Do we not, my lords? The council, including Ephron of Arbela, nodded and mumbled their unanimity. Jesus marveled at the skill with which Joseph of Ramtha manipulated the council. With only token debate, he unilaterally drafted Brother Apollonius and young Lazar as key players in an elite conspiracy that spanned 3 generations. Gentlemen, Joseph's manner turned coldly businesslike. Lazar's idea is sound, and I urge that we should follow his suggestion. Our Savior should be insulated as long as possible by a thick membrane of common folks and fools. However, it would be folly for us to leave him completely to the canal, so I'm suggesting that Brother Apollonius and Lazar remain part of his entourage. But what about his safety? The council cannot be isolated from his movements or his day-to-day difficulties that may arise, said Elam of Japhala. Our king will never be more than a half a day away from the shadow of our wings. Here is my plan. We will post a string of Confederates, one in every village, town, and city along his route. They will stand ready to see to his needs as he passes and relay messages between Jesus and the council. Lazar will be our angel and carry the names and locations of each agent in his talented head and will run ahead each day with news of the troops' approach and return with pertinent information. The council was impressed. Elam was particularly enchanted with the idea. He turned to Jesus and smiled. It'll also further add to your reputation for omniscience. If I were omniscient, I would know what you were talking about, Jesus laughed. Please explain. Let's imagine that you wish to dine with your band of Galileans in a certain town where you are approaching. Send Lazar quietly ahead to instruct our agents stationed there to arrange for a room and a sumptuous meal. Lazar will then return and secretly inform you that the feast will be waiting and that a man carrying a pitcher of water or a man with an eye patch or a wooden leg will lead you there. You then, with great and mystical solemnity, instruct 2 or 3 of your followers. Go now into the city and look for a man with an eye patch. Say unto him, my master asks, where is my guest room where I may eat my supper with my disciples? Without a word, the mysterious one-eyed man will lead them to the feasting hall and tell them, the master's supper awaits. The entire council broke into laughter, everyone talking at once. They each added their own comic hypothetical variation. It was a light-hearted moment and a pleasant conclusion to the day's deliberations. It was early evening, and the meeting had adjourned with everyone in high spirits. Lazare departed immediately to Carmel to update the abbot and received permission to escalate his duties. Jesus and Brother Apollonius convened the beloved disciples and briefed them on the new phase of the program. To everyone's delight, 4 of them hailed from the very towns and villages Jesus would eventually pass through on his way south to Judea. All eagerly volunteered to be posted in their hometowns. Brother Matthias, the son of a wealthy merchant in Jerusalem, begged to be stationed in the Holy City to coordinate housing and security for the eventual triumphal entry. The plan was taking on a life of its own. Everyone could feel the momentum. By the time Lazare returned from Carmel 2 days later, the lists of agents was ready for him to memorize. Nothing now remained but to choose the beloved disciples and pupils for the walk on the water. And that's where we'll end today. We'll pick it up over the weekend. I hope you've had a good week, and I hope you're ready to start your weekend. Continue to be good to yourself and be good to each other. Do what thou wilt shall be the whole of the law. Love is the law. Love under will. Have a great weekend.